Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you both. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
And yeah, I actually watched it just yesterday, this documentary. I mean, it's more like a thriller, like a true crime, based on a true crime, but it's like a thriller, the way it sort of plays out. It had me absolutely hooked from start to finish. But of course, lots of twists and turns. But maybe for people who aren't familiar with the documentary, can you just give us a brief introduction? What can people expect if they're going to watch it?
It's sort of a way of not giving too much away. I think that the Tinder Swindler is a story about a group of women swiping on what they think and believe is their dream man, only for after falling in love, forging a relationship with him, only to find out that he is nothing of who he says he is, and totally turns their lives upside down. But the great thing about this story is that the women attempt to get revenge.
Mm. And, where did your kind of involvement in the story, where did it all spark? Did you see it in the news? How did you come across it? And then what made you take the next step and think, this is definite material for a documentary?
Well, we originally became aware of it when the Norwegian newspaper VG, who are also featured in the film, they did a piece about it, which went viral. And then it was picked up by the Daily Mail and newspapers all over the world. So that's when we first became aware of it. And we were kind of reading it with our jaws on the floor, saying, this is unbelievable. It's funny that you say that, the documentary feels more like a movie, but this story read like a movie script. It was like, you could not make this up. And if you did, people wouldn't believe you. It wouldn't be believable as a fiction. It has to be factual or people won't get on board. So when you have a story like that presented to you, I mean, that's a dream for any documentary maker. So we were immediately, we'll do it. Basically, we wanted to tell the story.
Yeah. And for you, Felicity, like you coming on board as director?
I've been doing development, heading up the development team at Raw, the feature doc development team. And when this story came up, it's structured like a movie, it feels very much like a movie. There's, but it also, it's kind of every kind of movie in one. So there's the romance side to the story, there's the kind of the mystery, then it turns into kind of a thriller and a cat and mouse chase. There's a bit of horror in there as well. So I think for us, in terms of themes, that was really exciting. But then also, we met with Cecilia and Pernilla quite early on, just to sort of see them, to speak to them, to see if they'd want to make a film with us. And we were just blown away by how compelling they were as storytellers and how much they wanted to tell this story, and how much sort of deeper for them emotionally this had gone than sort of what I think we'd understood at first. So we sort of knew very much so that this could be a story whereby, it's not just sort of a kind of superficial look at something, that we could sort of dig deeper and and I guess help them get their story out there and expose Simon sort of even more than they had done already, and pick up the baton where they had sort of left it at that point.
And so what was that whole process like, I guess, from first kind of finding out the story and trying to get a hold of the subjects and speak to them, and then of course you would have had the research that went into the article, but then you probably had to do a lot of your own research, do all your interviews, and probably got quite close to your subjects as well. So what was that whole process like for you, and how long did that all take?
I mean, we were doing pre-production for quite a few months before we shot anything. So we started talking to the girls really properly in the summer of 2020. Everyone had quite a lot of time to get on Zoom. So we spent a lot of time on Zoom and just really getting their full stories. And really, because they had previously done a lot of news when the original Norwegian article came out, they did lots of morning shows and news interviews and so on, but those kind of vox pop type interviews. And so what we really needed them to understand and to get on board with was that this was going to be a much more in-depth exploration of what happened to them, and that they were going to have to approach it in a storytelling way, like they were telling it to their friends in the pub. And one of the key things was kind of making sure that they understood when they went into the interview, they would have to kind of go through the emotions that they went through as they got through their relationship with Simon. So even though when we met them, they were very angry with Simon and really feeling quite vengeful towards him, we had to work really hard to kind of get them back to the beginning and kind of tell the beginning of the story in the same way that they would have told the beginning of the story 1 week into their friends, you know, like, oh, I met this guy and he's amazing. And, you know, on paper, he was the perfect boyfriend. So it was kind of getting them to hold on to that emotion and to express that during the interview, so that we really did go through it in the same way that they did. If they'd started it angry, they never would have got the audience on board. So, you know, as Fliss said, you know, it starts as a romance, and we had to feel those romantic feelings coming from Cecilia. We had to get that energy from her, that excitement and that kind of optimism, with the promise to her that, you know, don't worry, you will get to express your anger, you will get to express your outrage, but we need to get there. It needs to happen at the right time in the story, otherwise people are never going to get on board. And they were really good at that, you know. They understood that, and they wanted the audience to feel as much compassion as they possibly could, so they understand why it was important that they went through all of those emotions at the same time. So yeah, there was months and months of research with the girls, and then obviously with the other contributors, like with the VG journalists, and basically just understanding how exactly the story unfolded in a chronological way, and then creatively, what's the best way to tell the story, because it's not always exactly chronologically.
And the other huge amount of work that we had to do was the women in the film hand over their entire WhatsApps, you know, which is months, if not years, of communication with him. So we, you know, transcribed every voice note, we read every message, we looked at every photograph that they shared, so that we knew what we were going to use as from this sort of digital archive in the film before we did the interviews. You know, what part of this archive can tell the story that we don't need to ask them about. You know, for instance, the pictures of Simon's bodyguard after he's been beaten up. And, you know, so that for us was an enormous task, but it was really an amazing sort of roadmap of how Simon does what he does. You know, you could see the con play out almost within these WhatsApps, and you know, was a great kind of Bible for us of their relationships.
I mean, that's something that you've done so well, because of course, you know, it's not like you had footage of the whole relationship and everything that went on. So it must have been a case of obviously piecing together what you did have and then kind of dramatizing the bits in between. And, you know, it's something that's quite difficult to do in this modern age. You even feel it sometimes when you're watching a film and people are supposed to be messaging each other, but you really bring it to life, and it really does feel like you're on the edge of your seat, even when you're, you know, watching the messages go back and forth. So was that something that was really important to do, to kind of splice that all together in just the right way so that you could build your narrative?
Yeah, exactly. We knew that, you know, we all live relationships, you know, out on our phones. We all have had that experience of, you know, when you're first dating someone and they're messaging you and you're getting a ping of your WhatsApp and you're excited to hear it. So we knew that there was this sort of sound design involved in it. But then we also knew that, you know, WhatsApp or, you know, FaceTime or what have you is a way that Simon draws these women in. You know, you get the boyfriend experience, the Simon experience, both in real life and also, you know, on your phone. I just come off the back of making Don't F with Cats, which again was a series that used you know, an amazing sort of digital archival Facebook stuff and really sort of brought that to life. So yeah, we definitely felt from the start that we wanted to use, you know, as much of this archive as we could, and in a way that would be as, you know, make it feel propulsive, and that terms of the story could happen via, you know, a message, via a ping, via a Simon is typing and you're wondering, you know, what is it that he's going to say. Yeah, but it was a huge effort. You know, we had an amazing assistant producer who was doing all of the graphics. He literally had you know, 2 phones where he was messaging back and forth and doing screen records so that we could get all of these, you know, WhatsApps on screen. And then obviously, you know, the editor then had to piece it all together in these huge, you know, time consuming, massive montages of information. So, yeah.
And I was thinking, watching it, you know, you must have felt it as well, interviewing these women, that of course, you know, it's really enraging as you watch it, and it's very frustrating, but you're also struck kind of on the other side of how kind of articulate and how amazing these women are, and how resilient, you know, kind of having gone through all this. And I think it seems like it was something very important to get right in the way they did tell their story, because you even saw, you know, when they were saying, when it first went up and went viral, a lot of the messages were quite negative. Oh, you're a gold digger, or oh, you were so gullible. But of course, when you're living it through them, you know, as they did, you realize that at the time it kind of made sense. So, you know, it's, you know, hindsight is 2020 kind of thing. So was it really amazing to be able to chat to them? And were you also struck by what amazing women they were?
Oh yeah, we were constantly just amazed by their courage in telling this story, and also just by their, I mean, all of these women, Simon's biggest mistake with each of them was underestimating them. And that's really where the real sense of victory comes. He never thought for a million years that Cecilia would do something as brave as share their entire WhatsApp relationship with the whole of the world. But that's where she was at. She was like, you know what, you're counting on me to go and hide in the shadows and to feel ashamed, because so often victims of cons like this, they do feel ashamed. And that's what the perpetrators rely on. So Cecilia really just flipped that on its head when she went to VG and said, you know what, I'll tell you everything. And she knew that she was going to get some grief. She knew that there are always people on their laptops and on their phones who find it very easy to spill out abuse at people. She knew that was coming, but she decided she was just going to take it. She's decided it was worth it. And then for Pernilla, I mean, in terms of what she did in Munich, I mean, that's kind of full-blown undercover agent type acting. Like, she's not a policewoman. She's never had any training like that. But these women just had such a fire in their belly because they felt so deeply hurt by what he had done to them, because it wasn't a quick con, especially with Pernilla. It was over the case of 8 months before he asked her for any money. She'd holidayed with him. He'd flown over to take her out for coffee. They're, you know, we read all their WhatsApp messages. They were talking about work problems, about dating life. So she just felt so outraged by what he had done and by the lack of response and support from the police that she thought, well, you know what, I'm just going to have to do something myself. So, you know, and they all did that. I don't want to give any spoilers, but, you know, they all got involved with that. So it's just, yeah, he massively underestimated them. And we were just constantly blown away by these women and what they had done, and constantly going, I don't think I would have had the balls to do that, actually. So they're real heroes.
Yeah. I felt like there was one scene that was like, this literally could have been in the Bourne Supremacy or the Bourne Ultimatum or whatever. It's like very much like that. But it almost makes you feel like, yeah, real life can be stranger than fiction, or you know, you kind of feel like you couldn't make this up.
No. Yeah, you couldn't have written it better, you know. As Barney said at the beginning, had it been a, you know, movie script, we couldn't have written it better ourselves, especially not with the ending.
And yes, I don't want to ask the wrong question in terms of spoilers, but, you know, what do you hope the impact of this documentary will be? Because, well, I watched it and I just felt so fired up. But, you know, can you almost see it as almost some kind of cathartic justice, you know, that what you can't maybe get in real life, or, you know, you can sort of get in another way, and sort of by doing some kind of expose, it's something, you know, it's not going to get, you know, these women their money back or their time back, but it's something.
Exactly. And I think we want people to feel fired up and angry at home. You know, far too many times in the past, I think people have come away saying, you know, what a silly woman. How could she have fallen for that? She almost deserved it, because I would never have swiped right on him. And I think we want to flip that on its head and say, these women did nothing wrong. They did not deserve what happened to them. He is the person that, you know, should be taking, you know, all of the blame for this. You know, there's no sense in this that he should be getting high-fived for what he's done, which has been the case in the past, obviously. And I think that, you know, Simon has been successful at what he's been doing because of the fact that he's been able to operate without his name being out there, without anyone knowing who he is. You know, all of these women did their own background checks, they checked out who he was, and it all stacked up. Whereas now, you know, Simon Levive, if he stays as Simon Levive, I mean, he's changed his name a number of times in the past, but he can't keep doing what he's been doing. His Tinder scamming days as Simon Levive are very much over, because now when you Google him, you know, this film, Cecilia's story, Penilla's story, Eileen's story will come up instead.
And, you know, the other thing I felt watching it is, of course, this is, you know, one particular story, and, you know, it's very much about kind of a particular kind of scam, but it does touch on lots of other issues, doesn't it? Kind of, you know, the dating in the, you know, media app age, whether women are believed when they try and go to the police, or they try and get justice for things that happen to them, you know, how they're treated online, and, you know, kind of victim blaming and things like that. So is that something else that was a consideration, that this does kind of touch on some much broader issues, actually?
Yeah, that was always one of our big concerns. We wanted to make sure that we were representing the women in a way that would guarantee them the best chance of a positive response, and so that people would focus on the criminal rather than the victim, because too often when women are the victims of crimes, it becomes, well, how could you have avoided that? Why is it on women to avoid it rather than them to just not do it in the first place? It's just insane. So we wanted this to be for the women, and it has served as that from the feedback that they've given us, but we wanted this to be an empowering experience. So just kind of, you know, don't underestimate us. We will find a way, you know, and, you know, like you say, they were kind of brushed off by the police, and it would, you know, to be fair, it's a tough one for the police to manage, because it's kind of what seem like minor crimes, but it's only when you put them all together that you realize the scope and scale of what Simon Levive is actually doing. But yeah, but in terms of the dating apps and everything else, you know, nobody ever wanted Tinder to be blamed for what happened to Cecilia or Pernilla or any of them, because Tinder's got nothing to do with it. You know, they could have just as easily met Simon in a bar. And we've spoken to victims who did meet Simon in a bar. And we've spoken to victims who met him when they worked with him. So it isn't avoid dating apps, it's avoid Simon, or whatever identity he happens to be using at the time.
And just very funny, because I'm out of time, but I actually did go on Instagram to see if I could find him, and he is there, and he accepted me to follow his account. And I'm thinking, well, when this documentary finally hits, do you think that he'll be able to stay that way? I don't know. Do you have any sense of what will happen when, you know, the rest of the world sees it?
Well, he knows it's coming.
Yeah, he does know. He knows what his response will be.
He'll probably try and spin it.
Yeah.
He'll try and make money out of it somehow. Yeah. But who knows what he'll do? He's a very unpredictable fellow.
Let's see. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you both. Thank you so much. I can't wait for everyone else to see this incredible documentary.
Thank you, Sarah.